Have you ever met someone who truly believes they control everything? Your yard, your mail, even your family? Well, today's story is about one of those people. An HOA Karen who didn't just cross a line, she bulldozed right over it. So sit back, like this video, subscribe for more wild HOA stories, and tell me which country you're watching from. You're going to want to hear how this one ends. It all began on a calm Saturday morning in a small gated community called Willow Heights. My wife, Emma, and I had lived there for only 2 years. We bought a cozy home on a quiet cul-de-sac, hoping it would be the perfect place to raise our growing family. Emma was 8 months pregnant, glowing, and more excited than ever to become a mother. But what should have been a peaceful final stretch of her pregnancy turned into a nightmare the moment Karen, the HOA president, decided we weren't community material. Karen had a reputation that traveled faster than gossip. A woman in her mid-50s with perfectly styled hair and a clipboard that seemed surgically attached to her hand, she patrolled the neighborhood daily, issuing violation notices for anything she deemed unsightly. Lawn too long? Fine. Fence color too bright? Fine. Driveway with a smudge of oil? Fine. We'd managed to avoid her wrath for the most part until the week before Emma's due date. The trouble started when an ambulance arrived at our house in the middle of the night. Emma had gone into early labor and things got serious fast. I called emergency services and within minutes, flashing lights filled our driveway. The paramedics rushed inside to help her, loading her carefully onto a stretcher. But as I grabbed our hospital bag and ran outside, Karen appeared. Bathrobe, slippers, and clipboard in hand. Even in a moment of panic, she couldn't resist interfering. The ambulance had parked partially on the edge of the cul-de-sac, blocking Karen's SUV from leaving. That was enough to set her off. She started shouting, demanding the vehicle be moved. The medics ignored her, focused on Emma. I was too frantic to care. I got in my truck and followed the ambulance as it sped off to the nearest hospital. But that night was only the beginning. The next morning, when I returned home to grab some essentials, I found a letter taped to our door, an official HOA violation. Unauthorized emergency vehicle obstructing access road, it read. Beneath that, a fine for $500. I couldn't believe it. My wife was in labor and Karen had the nerve to fine us for needing an ambulance. Still, I pushed it aside. Emma and her baby came first. But Karen wasn't done. Over the next few days, she began harassing me at the hospital, first through emails demanding I pay the fine immediately, then through calls claiming that Emma's hospital stay violated HOA regulations about extended guest parking because my truck was in the lot overnight. It was absurd. Her obsession with control had reached new heights. Then came the day everything snapped. It was early afternoon when the hospital called me back to the maternity wing. Emma had gone into active labor. I rushed to her room, heart pounding with anticipation, but when I arrived at the door, security guards stood there, confused and tense. A woman was yelling inside. It was Karen. Somehow she had gotten into the hospital pretending to be family. She was demanding that Emma be removed from a non-approved facility because, according to her, the HOA's insurance policy didn't recognize the hospital as part of the community medical network. Staff were stunned, unsure whether to remove her or call the police. Emma was terrified, in the middle of labor, crying while this woman ranted about policy violations. When I finally reached the room, I saw the chaos Karen had caused. Nurses had stopped everything. The monitors beeped erratically. Emma's blood pressure was spiking. The room that should have been filled with warmth and excitement had turned into a war zone. Security eventually dragged her out, still shouting about how she was within her rights. The hospital pressed charges for trespassing, but even that didn't stop her. She filed a complaint against us with the HOA the very next day, claiming that our behavior had violated the association's reputation clause. By then, I'd had enough. I recorded everything. The calls, the emails, the harassment. I gathered witness statements from neighbors, nurses, and even the paramedics she had yelled at. For the first time, Karen wasn't dealing with someone scared of her clipboard. When Emma and our newborn daughter finally came home, I made one promise to myself. This woman was never going to torment another family again. The day the HOA's disciplinary hearing came around, I walked in with a folder an inch thick. Karen sat at the head of the table, smug as ever, flanked by her hand-picked board members. She thought she had control. She always did. But what she didn't know was that this case was about to leave the neighborhood entirely. As I presented the evidence, one of the board members, a retired attorney, turned pale. The scope of Karen's behavior went far beyond HOA rules. She had impersonated a family member, interfered in a medical emergency, and violated multiple federal privacy laws. Before the hearing could end, the local police arrived to serve her with an official court summons. The case had been escalated, and this time it wouldn't be handled in the HOA's little meeting room. It was going to a real courtroom before a real judge. And the best part? The judge ordered every minute of the hearing to be recorded and made public, live streamed for the community to see exactly what Karen had done. For someone who thrived on power and appearances, it was the one punishment she could never escape. As the board members whispered nervously and Karen's smug expression vanished, I knew we had just entered a whole new level of justice. Because this time, everyone would see her for who she really was. The morning of the hearing felt eerily calm. The kind of calm that only comes before a storm. The HOA board had no idea what was waiting for them. The livestream link had been posted publicly, as ordered by the judge, and by 9 a.m., hundreds of people across the community and even outside the state were already tuned in. The small courthouse, usually quiet and half empty, was packed. News reporters lined the hallways, microphones ready. Families from Willow Heights filled the benches, whispering among themselves. Some were there out of curiosity, others out of fear, but most were there because they had their own stories about Karen. I took my seat near the front, just behind my attorney. Emma stayed home with our baby, still recovering, but she watched from the live stream along with the rest of the neighborhood. Karen arrived late, strutting into the courtroom in her usual power outfit, pressed blazer, oversized sunglasses, and that clipboard she never seemed to let go of. She looked confident, as though the cameras were there for her. But her confidence began to crack the moment the judge entered the room. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man with decades of courtroom experience, known for his intolerance of arrogance. He didn't smile. He didn't waste words. He simply looked at the files in front of him, then glanced up at Karen. The case was presented in sections. First came the timeline, the ambulance incident, the harassment at the hospital, the unauthorized entry, and the subsequent false reports. Each point was laid out clearly with evidence to back it up. The room fell silent as the videos and voice recordings played over the speakers. The sound of Karen's voice filled the courtroom, shouting at paramedics, threatening fines, and accusing nurses of conspiring against the community. Every word she had ever denied was right there, recorded and undeniable. Then came the most damning part. The footage from the hospital security cameras. The entire courtroom watched as Karen entered the maternity wing, waving her HOA badge like it was a law enforcement ID, and barged into Emma's room while staff tried to stop her. Her behavior spoke louder than any testimony could. For a long moment, no one moved. The judge removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes, and stared straight at her. The room held its breath. Even through the screen, you could feel the weight of silence pressing down. Karen tried to defend herself. She talked about community standards, about protecting the neighborhood's reputation, and about rules that needed to be upheld. But every excuse she made only made her look worse. She wasn't protecting anyone. She was abusing power, and now everyone knew it. The HOA board tried to distance themselves. They claimed Karen acted independently, without their consent. But when the judge reviewed the HOA's internal emails, another truth came to light. Some of them had known about Karen's harassment for months and said nothing. A few even supported her actions, afraid of her influence. The hearing turned into a reckoning. Homeowners began to speak up one after another. A single mother described how Karen fined her for hanging laundry in her backyard because it looked poor. An elderly veteran talked about being threatened with eviction for keeping a flag outside his porch. A young couple shared how Karen sabotaged their landscaping plans because she didn't approve of their color choices. By the time they were done, Karen's image as the neighborhood's protector had completely collapsed. She sat silently, no longer smirking, her hands trembling slightly as the list of complaints grew longer. The judge listened carefully, jotting notes between testimonies. He finally leaned forward, his voice low but firm. He said that the HOA's authority did not extend to personal medical matters, emergency services, or anyone's private life. He reminded them that the law existed for a reason, and that power without accountability was not leadership, but tyranny. Karen's attorney tried to request a recess, but the judge refused. He wanted the case done in one sitting. He called for final statements, then turned his attention to me. I spoke calmly, recounting how my wife had begged for peace, how she had gone through trauma no expecting mother should ever experience, and how that moment in the hospital changed everything for our family. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't attack. I just told the truth. When I finished, the judge nodded slowly and took a deep breath. He said he would deliver the verdict the next morning. The courtroom emptied gradually with murmurs filling the air. Reporters rushed to film reactions. Some board members walked out pale, realizing their HOA might not survive this. But Karen didn't leave immediately. She sat frozen at the defendant's table, staring blankly at her clipboard as if the rules written there might somehow save her. For the first time, she looked small, truly small, like someone who'd built her identity on control, now realizing it was all gone. Outside the courthouse, the community gathered. Many came up to me to thank me for standing up to her. Some cried. Others were angry, not at her specifically, but at themselves for staying silent so long. It felt like a collective exhale, a weight being lifted from years of quiet fear. That night, I barely slept. I stayed up with Emma, holding her hand as we watched the news reports roll in. The story had gone viral. Clips from the hearing were everywhere, on local news, social media, even national talk shows. The phrase, HOA Karen hospital scandal, was trending across platforms. But the most powerful moment came when the judge himself released a public statement. He confirmed that he would not only deliver his verdict live, but also release the HOA's internal investigation records. Every hidden decision, every unfair fine, every manipulative rule Karen had ever enforced would be exposed. The next day promised to be bigger than any of us could have imagined. Karen's empire of control was about to crumble live before thousands of people. And she had no one left to blame but herself. Morning broke under a pale orange sky. The courthouse parking lot was already full by the time I arrived. Cameras, tripods, and microphones covered every corner. The story had exploded overnight, spreading across social media like wildfire. People weren't just curious anymore. They were furious. The live stream had already started, and tens of thousands were watching. Some were from my country, others from abroad. I could see comments flashing across the feed, viewers from Canada, Australia, the UK, and even places I never expected. The world was watching one small courtroom in one small town because a homeowners association had gone too far. Karen arrived flanked by 2 lawyers and no confidence. Her usual swagger was gone. Her hair, once perfectly styled, was hastily tied back. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't have to. The glares from the crowd said everything. Inside, the judge entered and called the room to order. His tone was clipped, his expression unreadable. He began by summarizing the evidence, line by line, from the day of the hospital incident to the numerous acts of abuse that had surfaced since. The facts were clear. Karen had impersonated authority. She had violated hospital security protocols. She had falsified reports. She had harassed multiple homeowners and misused HOA funds to protect herself from scrutiny. The HOA board had failed in their duty to oversee her actions, effectively enabling her behavior. Then, the judge began reading his decision. He ruled that Karen was guilty of harassment, defamation, and obstruction of emergency services. He ordered immediate removal of her from the HOA board and banned her from holding any position of authority in any community organization ever again. She was also fined heavily and sentenced to community service. The HOA itself wasn't spared. The judge ordered a full audit of its finances, suspension of its enforcement powers, and an emergency vote to dissolve or rebuild under state supervision. Homeowners were free from its grip, at least for now. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in a stunned silence that quickly gave way to whispers, then applause. Cameras flashed, reporters rushed to send updates. You could feel the release of years of tension in that room. Karen sat motionless. Her face was pale, her fingers clutched tightly around the handle of her bag. The judge turned to her directly and said that people who hold power must understand what responsibility truly means. Then, he dismissed the court. That single moment marked the end of her reign. Outside, homeowners gathered around me again. Some hugged each other, some cried. The sense of unity was unlike anything Willow Heights had ever seen. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years were suddenly reconnecting, planning how to rebuild the community the right way. Later that week, the audit report confirmed what many suspected. Karen had embezzled funds to pay for personal travel, gifts, and renovations. Every secret she'd buried had finally been unearthed. The district attorney opened a separate investigation. Within days, Karen's mugshot was all over the news. The woman who once fined people for painting their fences slightly off-white was now facing real legal consequences. The HOA office was shuttered. The board members resigned. The old rules about mailbox colors, lawn heights, and even how long you could park were all suspended. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt peaceful. I spent that weekend with my wife and daughter. The house was filled with laughter again. The garden bloomed. The air felt light, no longer heavy with Karen's constant interference. The following month, the homeowners voted to rebuild the association as a voluntary committee, transparent, limited in power, and focused only on maintenance, not control. They asked me to be part of it, but I declined. I'd had my fill of power struggles. I just wanted peace. But something remarkable happened. The story continued spreading online. Millions of people watched the live hearing. News anchors debated it. Lawyers praised the ruling as a landmark case against HOA abuse. One comment on the live stream stuck with me. It said, "This isn't just about one Karen. It's about every person who ever thought they were above others because of a little power." That line stayed with me for weeks. Months later, Karen's house went up for sale. No one wanted to buy it at first. Eventually, it was purchased by a young couple who'd watched the hearing online and said they wanted to, quote, bring kindness back to the street. They repainted it, tore down the old HOA president parking only sign, and filled the front yard with sunflowers. The day they moved in, my wife smiled for the first time in a long while. The neighborhood was quiet again. Kids played without worry. No one feared fines for a misplaced trash can. It felt like a new beginning. The live stream case became a lesson across the country, even appearing in legal journals as an example of overreach and justice. I was invited to speak on a few shows, but I preferred staying home. My fight wasn't for fame, it was for fairness. As for Karen, last I heard, she moved out of state. Rumor had it she tried to join another community board under a different name, but once people found out who she was, they refused. Justice has a way of following those who try to escape it. Looking back, I realized that power doesn't corrupt everyone. It only corrupts those who already crave control. The rest of us just want to live our lives without being told what shade of green our grass should be. So, if there's one thing this entire ordeal taught me, it's that standing up to injustice, no matter how small it seems, can change everything. So to everyone watching from around the world, thank you for being part of this story. Tell me which country you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more real HOA and Karen drama stories. Because sometimes justice doesn't just happen in court. It happens when ordinary people finally say enough.